Alright, what is up, Booger Beans? Welcome back to another episode of Adventures with Boog, your weekly source for canoeing, fishing, and camping. This week on Adventures with Boog, as discussed in our previous video, if you haven't seen that one, go up here and check it out. It's about our ice fishing shack and how we're doing a winter tent. We're going to be doing our DIY stove jack. Before we get going, I want to say thanks to Steve Wallace, Sam's Outdoors, and Far North Bushcraft and Survival. They kind of they all did a little bit of some DIY and how to install a stove jack and kind of some ideas on how to build one. So I'm using some of their ideas and some of my own ideas to create my own stove jack here for our winter tent. The reasons that we didn't buy one was A, too expensive, and B, there wasn't one that really fit our stove jack very well. So today we're going to build our own and hope for the best. So I'm going to go hook you guys up on the overhead camera here, and then I'll kind of go through all the pieces you'll need to build this stove jack, and then we'll get started here. Alright guys, so I've laid out all the stuff that we are hopefully going to need for this job. Pair of safety glasses, protect your eyes, pair of gloves to help keep the silicone off your hands. You can get silicone in your hands. It's not going to really do anything to you, but it just can irritate your skin, or it's a little bit easier to clean up if you just use the gloves and just throw them away after. Pair of scissors, hopefully a good pair of scissors, because the fiberglass cloth can be kind of difficult to cut sometimes. Sharper the better. This is just a cheap pair that we have laying around the house. Some parchment paper, that's just to help keep the silicone from sticking. Some high temp silicone, so this is 600 degree Fahrenheit high temp silicone for sealing stovepipes and wood stoves. If you can get 1000 degree, that gives you a little bit of safety margin. There is a possibility that your stovepipe could get up around that 600 degrees, but our stovepipe is further enough away from the stove that I don't think we're going to see that temperature at the stove jack itself. You're going to need some tape. I just have some clear packing tape. Masking tape would be a little bit better and work a little bit better for this job, but this is what I had laying around the house, so that's what we're going to use. Bondo fiberglass cloth. You don't have to use Bondo itself. That's just the quick and easy stuff that I can pick up from Canadian Tire. This is a 25 inch by 46.5 inch piece of cloth. We're going to make a stove jack that is 23 by 23 when it's done and folded up. So we need 25 inches by 25 inches of cloth, and then we'll do two 1-inch folds on the end to make it at 23 by 23 cloth. You're also going to need some sort of spatula. I'm using just a plastic cheap disposable spatula again, so that once it's done I don't have to try and grind the silicone off or clean it off after. I can just kind of throw it away, and it's not a big deal. It's a couple bucks. Also, you're going to need a piece of, this is a piece of 3/4 inch MDF that I have just laying around from a previous project. You need something that you can attach your fiberglass cloth to and kind of keep it spread out while you apply the silicone. Fiberglass, that MDF is good for that. You can use cardboard, a piece of plywood, really anything, honestly. Just something that will keep the fiberglass firm, that you can push pressure in to really soak that silicone right through the fiberglass to keep it waterproof and good to go. So I'm going to put on my safety gear, and then we will start laying everything out and start the project here. So the first couple things you're going to need right off the bat is the parchment paper, scissors, and your masking tape. So what you want to do is cover the entire board that you're using in parchment paper, or enough space that you can lay out your fiberglass cloth and have the parchment paper completely underneath it, because silicone is quite sticky. So when we put that through the fiberglass, we don't want it sticking to the MDF. So we put the parchment paper, and that will stop it from sticking to the MDF. So we're going to go ahead now and lay out our parchment paper. I don't really think they have a top or bottom on parchment paper. If they do, let me know in the comments down below. Alright. There we go. Alright, so there we've got our MDF board all covered. I did get one little rip here, so that kind of sucks, but not much we can do about that. I could redo it, but for that little bit of rip, it's not a big deal. I could actually, let's just put a piece of tape over top of it. There, good to go. No worries. I just gotta wait for the damn heater to turn off here so I can talk again. Okay, now that the furnace has stopped running, we can finish doing this. A couple things I forgot. You're gonna need a tape measure and some sort of marking, as well as for the silicone tube that I got, you'll need a caulking gun. You can get the silicone in a squeeze tube, but it's just not gonna be enough, I don't think, to do the amount of cloth that we want to do. So you need a caulking gun for this style of tube with the back there. So the next step, I guess, is going to be opening our fiberglass cloth, and we'll see how good these scissors are. They didn't cut that, so they're probably not going to cut the fiberglass, so that's a good start. Take out your cloth, throw the plastic away. Then you want to fold it out. And it's going to be this way. So there's a couple things that really suck when working with fiberglass, and it's all these frays that go literally everywhere. Not much you can do about them. We're just gonna basically tape over top of them for now, and then when we end up sewing this up, we'll actually basically fold that inside the cloth. The one thing I am noticing is the bottom cut on this cloth is not even close to straight. So I'm hoping this side is better. This side looks to be a little bit better, yep. So what we're gonna do here is we are gonna apply tape to the bottom part of this cloth. One piece of tape. Try and get it as close to the edge that can still grab the cloth as possible, and you wanna try and keep it as flat as possible, hopefully in one go without ripping out a whole bunch of cloth, because that's gonna be a problem if we have that happen a whole bunch. So try and stick it down there. We can come back and kind of touch it up once we sew it together as needed after the fact. But for right now, that's what's gonna have to do, just like that. Then we got to go ahead and cut the top, but this tape doesn't stick to parchment either, so we're gonna have to tape it around the outside here a little bit to try and get that to stay in place when we do this all here. Stick that around the outside like that to stick to the back of the board. I can turn this guy around here. Oh, crap. Okay, put that back on there. Get it out. Now we got to cut along this top edge here. So there we are. We've got it kind of all silicone or taped up here. Now I guess it's time to throw on the gloves get the silicone ready, and then we're basically just gonna spread it on there. And hope for the best. Alright, now I've got the caulking gun loaded with the silicone. We're basically just gonna put silicone over top and then use the spatula to smooth it all down as best we can, and then we'll let it sit. Do this in a well ventilated area. This stuff's pretty dang stinky. And yeah, wish me luck. There we go. I am just gonna put that aside and tape up the end just so that it doesn't dry on me, because we will have to flip over and do a second coat on the back side of this come tomorrow night. So here we go. Let's just work that in there as best we can. I'm just gonna put a little bit more on around the edge, just so that we get coverage all the way right to the edge. The silicone isn't to protect the fiberglass from the heat, but it's actually to waterproof the fiberglass, because the fiberglass is not waterproof. It's full of tons and tons and tons of tiny little holes. So what this silicone is basically going to do is fill in all those holes. Now, if you miss a spot, it's not too big of a deal. You can come back. You can recover it. That's no worries. We're also going to do both sides to waterproof it, so shouldn't have really any waterproof issues. Also, it's not really going to be out in the rain so much, as more just a melt from the snow, or just condensation, I guess, frost and whatever else. But it's not going to be out in torrential downpours or anything like that, really, as it's going on a winter tent, not really a summer tent. But anyhow, you still want to do the best you can to cover all the cracks, all the edges. Also, one thing I definitely would recommend this is to use a respirator. This is really nasty stuff here. Really stinky. The more surface area you spread out, the more that is gonna smell and gonna stink. So when you're doing a large area like this, yeah, that's why it's so stinky. That's for sure. There. That's basically all we have to do, right? Like that. Basically cover the whole dang thing. Then let it dry for 12 to 24 hours. Basically, this is going to be 24 hours because I'm going to leave it until Friday night, which is tomorrow night. And then I'll come back, take it off, flip it over, do the other side, and then we'll progress on to the next steps. So I guess we'll see you tomorrow evening. Alright, it is Friday night, and this has now basically cured. It does feel kind of like sticky still. but I think that will go away over time. But it's also just the way silicone is. Silicone kind of has that stick. But it says 24 hours to cure, and it's 24 hours, so it should basically be cured. So now I'm going to take this, flip it over, do the same thing on the back side. One of the things I did do tonight is I grabbed a respirator, because last time it was pretty darn stinky. So that's going to help out a little bit, stop from getting a headache or whatever, and a little bit better on the lungs, that's for sure. So let's get this untaped and flip it over and start on the other side here. So now there is some spots obviously that I missed, that we can go back and kind of patch up as we need to later on. Obviously the tape is covering some of the stuff and whatever else, so we'll go back later and patch that up. Shouldn't be too big of an issue, I hope anyways. I also realized I probably made this stove jack like way bigger than it needs to be, so I'm not really worried about there being a little bit extra on the edge. I might end up just cutting it off in the end anyways because of how massive it is. I didn't realize that it was, I know how big 2 foot by 2 foot is, but when I went and looked at a whole bunch of other stove jacks, I realized that there's no need for it to be as big as I made it. It probably only needs to be a foot or two, or like a foot, maybe 18 inches. And it will definitely do the job anyway, so. Some strings. Looks like the silicone definitely permeated through the sheet rather well because it's actually stuck down to the parchment paper. I was hoping that that parchment paper wouldn't really stick, but it's definitely stuck to it, that's for sure. That's for darn sure. Alright, there's all the tape off. So as you guys can see in the corners here, definitely need to finish, get some full coverage on that. So we'll be working on that tonight. Make sure we don't put the tape in the same spot. And you want to make sure when you're taking this off that you pull on the parts that are covered in silicone and not just the cloth, because it will again pull out those fibers, and then you're gonna basically continually make your cloth smaller and smaller. So you want to make sure you're pulling on the silicone rather than just the glass fibers themselves. She's still wet in that little spot there, actually. Got a bit of a glob there. Still just a hair bit wet. You want to make sure you try and peck off all of that paper, because otherwise you're not gonna get the best bond to the fiberglass if there's paper in the way, obviously. Make sure you try and get all that paper off as best you can. I'm really surprised actually that this stuck to the parchment. I thought it would just come kind of right off. Didn't expect that. So you can actually, by feeling the fabric, you can feel that the rubber has, or that silicone has almost permeated literally everywhere, it seems. It feels kind of rubbery even on the back side here. So that's really good. That's what we want to see for sure. We got to get it to permeate as much as we can so that this becomes waterproof. Otherwise, it's not really doing its job. Okay, nice. That's awesome. I'm actually really stoked on how it turned out. So I'm gonna have to go grab some more parchment paper. We'll put that down, put this on top of it, and then we'll be ready for the next coat. Alright guys, so I flipped it over and I've taped in different positions than where the old tape was, so I can kind of fill in those holes and gaps. Also, I'm trying to use as little tape as possible so I can get the most coverage possible. And this silicone, actually, because it's a little bit, it's rubber, right? So it's kind of actually sticking down to the tape and parchment underneath it. So I've just kind of basically squished it down as hard as I can and as flat as I can, and then we're just gonna put the silicone back on top and we're going to spread it in. Probably won't be able to talk to you guys because I am gonna be wearing my paint mask because how stinky this stuff was last time. I didn't really like it. So we'll do that and let's see how she looks. All right, so that's on there. We are gonna let her cure up for another 24 hours. Come take a look at her tomorrow morning. That's really all we can do for now. We just hang out and wait. I tried to cover as much as I can, get a good thick coat on there. It already looked really sealed from the other side, but we seal it again from this side, and then we'll do a bit of a water test on it before we ever actually sew it up or put it on the tent. That's for sure. But this is good for now, and we'll check back in tomorrow night. Okay, so we've got our piece of silicone fiberglass, and we basically removed it from the backing. One little thing is, on this last one, I actually put half of it with packing tape and half of it with parchment paper. If I was to do this again, I would just use packing tape on the entire sheet of MDF because the silicone didn't stick to it at all, whereas on the paper, it's still stuck in a couple places. So this was way easier to just peel it off than it was on the parchment paper. So next time, I would just use packing tape and just push it down nice as flat as you can get it, and then just put your fiberglass on top of that. It's works a little bit better than the parchment paper does, and the tape actually sticks to the tape itself rather than, it doesn't really stick to the parchment paper. So now what we're gonna do is, where we weren't able to cover it fully, I'm gonna basically put the straight edge along there, kind of right on that edge like that, and then cut and get rid of all of this crap that's around the outside edge that we don't really want. Be careful using these Olfa knives and stuff. They are crazy sharp. I've cut myself lots of times with them. ended up with stitches a few times with them, so be careful. Try not to slice yourself open if you can. Now I'm just going to try and just cut right along that straight edge. Make sure you hold that straight edge down nice and firm. It does kind of stick to the silicone, so that kind of helps it keep it stuck down for sure. But then once we slice it, we can just peel that off. These Olfa knives or scalpels should cut this fiberglass without too much issue, I think. Shouldn't have too much of an issue. As I'm saying that, it's like not wanting to cut. There she cut. Okay. Try to get rid of any frays that we can. Get a nice clean edge. And we're gonna do that all the way around the outside of the fabric. And then basically, whatever size fabric we end up with, that's what we'll get. I have done some looking on the internet, and the one that I'm making is actually quite a bit bigger than the ones that I've seen. So I'm not really worried about having a little bit of loss to this cutoff or anything like that. If you want to make a bigger one, you can. It's not a big deal, but it's just a piece of MDF I have and kind of piece of fiberglass and whatever else I got. We don't really have that option, so I'm trying to keep this really cost effective too. Right now it's kind of that Christmas time, starting to get to expensive time of the year, so right now the cost of this whole stove jack has only been about $40, so that's pretty good compared to getting a more expensive made one. So, and I don't have to worry about how long it's going to take to ship it to get it here. I can just build it, and if it ever breaks or rips or tears or anything like that, I either know how to fix it or I can build another one. So that's kind of the one reason why I like building stuff myself, is if it ever does break, you can always just fix it yourself because you built it. So that's kind of nice. Whereas some things, if you buy them and then you can't fix it yourself, you got to pay lots of money to get it fixed or buy a new one. So I like to build lots of stuff myself. And we're gonna go kind of on that edge, a little bit out from it. We're gonna put a mark 1 inch and 2 inches. Then we're gonna put a mark here, 1 inch and 2 inches. Then we could put one right by the edge at 2 inches, I guess. 2 inches. And then one from this edge, 2 inches. So if we go like that, and like this, like that, and fold that over like that, and mark that out. There we go. Now we can cut that corner out, and then when we fold it, we'll have a nice fold on this edge, and we won't have any big overlaps or anything that look kind of crappy, look kind of rough. There we go. Take that corner out, and see, that got rid of a large amount of that silicone, that fiberglass that didn't have silicone all the way over it. We still have a little bit right there. We can always just throw a little bit of silicone on that before I sew it up or whatever. I'm not really too worried about it. Okay, there we are. There is our base piece of fabric. Nice. Looks really good. Now, what we're gonna do is these are gonna get folded down at the corners there. This is rubber, so it is gonna want to spring back a little bit, of course. So I'm wondering what's the best way to fix this. I don't know. I want to maybe just take some paper clips or something and just put it on there to hold it down while I sew it, maybe. I don't know. I'm gonna have to think on this one. In the comments down below, right here before we go any further, what would you guys do? How would you keep that there for when you sew it? I think I'm gonna use paper clips, or maybe even like, yeah, paper clips, and then kind of sew a little bit, move the paper clips forward, and do it. Maybe a safety pin. Maybe a safety pin would work best. It's a little weird thing right there. I might have to throw some more silicone on that. This stuff is really sticky. Yeah, let me know how you guys would do it. I'm gonna try and figure this out in the next couple minutes, and then I'll come back and update you once I've figured it out. Alright guys, so I've got the corners kind of pinned. My mom helped me with that. This corner is kind of messed up, so I'm gonna have to fix that. This is just pins in place to hold it for now. While I do it. Yeah, now we just gotta kind of sew it all in, and then I'll come back and talk to you guys once that's done. I'm not good at sewing, so I'm not gonna do any DIY on how to sew. I'm learning how to do it right now, so YouTube someone else, or I'll go and find a couple videos and put the links down below. But yeah, now we're just gonna try and sew it up, so I'll get back to you guys in a little bit. Alright guys, so I've got the first side, or the first strip I guess, done here. I made this little clamp. It actually helps keep it flat, and I can pull the silicone fiberglass nice and tight, and I can easily just flip back and forth as I'm sewing all the way down. And it actually, it looks like it turned out pretty good. That's what it looks like on that side, and that's what it looks like on this side. Not bad, really. I'm actually quite surprised. This is the first time I've ever sewn anything together, and it turned out pretty darn good, actually. Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna fold all the corners like this or not. I'm still trying to figure that out. Just because this obviously isn't a perfect square, I just kind of eyeballed it when I cut it, obviously, so maybe that's a tip. Try and measure it. It's not super easy to measure, but if you try and measure it a bit, it makes it a little bit easier for you in the long run. But now that side's kind of sewed, it's kind of keeping this down. But obviously, I don't know if you guys can see there, but obviously there is holes that now go all the way through the fabric. So we have to silicone either on top, or what I'm thinking I might do is when I put this on the fishing hut, I'm gonna run a bead of silicone and then clamp it together and leave it, and then maybe sew it after, or sew it before, or sew it while it's still wet, or something like that. I don't know. We'll figure that out when we get to it. But we got to do something to kind of seal all the edges so that it doesn't leak into the tent when the snow is melting on it. Again, waterproof spray would probably just take care of that. I don't know for sure. Not a professional sewer. But I'm going to go ahead, sew up all the other sides, and then I'll check back in with you guys when that's all done. Alright, so I've got a couple sides, the next side clamped in. I'm ready to start working on it. Just want to go through a couple things that I've noticed. The thread I'm using is 100% polyester thread, and this is what they call extra strong. I don't know what that means, but it's a pretty thick, pretty heavy duty thread. It takes a good amount of force to rip it, that's for sure. And also I'm using this needle, but apparently it's a sewing machine needle. It's got kind of a big end on the back of it, which I didn't realize. So you might not want to use sewing machine needles because they put a bigger hole when you push them all the way through. But that being said, since it has a bigger back, it's much easier to push through that thick fabric, because I can kind of push my thumb on it without having to use a thimble or anything, without the needle poking back into my finger. So that's kind of nice, but it does make a little bit bigger hole, so we have to use a little bit more silicone to fill the holes. But I kind of like it. Maybe you should use a sewing machine needle. I don't know, but yeah, I'm gonna sew up the next couple sides and then I'll get back with you guys. Alright, so I have sewn fully all the way around the edges. I haven't done these corner flaps yet, but now it's laying really nice and flat. It wasn't too bad to sew. It took about 2.5 hours. I did that all by hand. It's all back. I think it's called a back stitch, where you like go forward a stitch, come back through the same hole, go forward a stitch, come back through the same hole. So it kind of makes a loop all the way around. Yeah, it turned out really good actually. I'm pretty impressed with what we ended up with here. Let's see kind of the size we ended up with. So the size we ended up with was 16.5 by 19. Completely random measurements. Success. That's, I think, going to be more than big enough. I know from the stove itself, once you're about 12 inches away from it, you can put your hand there indefinitely. It's warm, but it's not burning hot. It's not going to burn your skin or anything, so I don't think that will have anything to do with the tarp or any issues with the tarp. The pipe is also much colder than the actual stove is. It's only going to be 200-300 degrees, hopefully. Any hotter than that, we're basically overburning the stove, which is probably not needed. We're just sending a lot of extra waste heat out the chimney. So I think we put the hole in the middle. That gives a lot of space here, a lot of space there. I don't think we're going to have any issues with that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and mark the center of the sheet. And then I'm going to draw a 3-inch hole. And then I'm going to put a bead of, well, actually I'm going to cut it out. And then I'm going to put a bead of silicone all the way around it. And that will basically kind of tighten up around the pipe, basically. Not really tight, but it'll be around the pipe. Help stop any snow or rain or anything like that coming in the edges. I understand on a sloped roof that the hole would actually be like an oblong hole like that. But I'm going to put just a circle hole so that when it goes in, it will kind of bind on the pipe a bit, which will help to hold the roof up a little bit, but it'll also help to seal all the way around the pipe. So that's the next steps here. Let's get on it. I'm actually gonna replace this blade. That fiberglass eats those blades pretty darn quick. Even though the silicone's on there, you still don't want to be pulling fibers out of that cloth. So you want to make sure you're using a really sharp Olfa knife or really sharp X-Acto knife or whatever you want to call it, to cut that fiberglass. Otherwise, you're gonna pull fibers and just make a mess. And that's the last thing we want, is to pull fibers. That silicone does do a pretty darn good job of kind of making this a really cohesive, or one fabric, that's for sure. Does a really nice job of that, which is nice. So I do have a piece of our 3-inch pipe. This is just a new elbow I got. So it fits perfectly on there. Nice and tight. Not too much space, just about maybe about 1/8 of an inch around. Not very much at all. So that's exactly what I was looking for. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to take that off, grab all this paper, rip all of that off. Take all this tape off. Grab some new tape. Some new tape down. Try and keep it nice and smooth if we can. Basically right where that hole was cut. There we go. Just like that. Now I put this guy back on here. So it kind of is tacky almost, but it's not sticky, but it's just like that kind of rubber feeling, and it actually kind of sticks down to the MDF, which is kind of nice. So now we're just gonna take some tape, put it on here, kind of stick it down nice. Probably don't need to use that much tape. Probably a waste of tape. Could probably just tape the corners. Just throw a piece of tape like that. Actually, I could probably silicone all those edges. Now we're going to throw a bit of tape around this piece of ducting. So help stop the silicone sticking to the metal, because I want to use this elbow later, so I don't want it to stick to it. Stick that right in the middle of that hole, nice. Now we need our respirator, gloves. So now what we are going to do is I'm going to seam seal all of this. That shouldn't take too much silicone at all. I won't be able to get the corners, but once that cures, then I'll put tape in the middle and then I can get the corners. I do have more sewing to do. Once it goes on the tent, I'm gonna run another line, like another sewing line right there, and then all the way around like that on the inside. And then again, that will all have to be siliconed. I might have to run 2 lines when it goes on the tent. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out how to do the tent. I might run an internal line like that, and then flip it up, put a bead of silicone, and then run an external line. Maybe that's the best way to do it. I don't know. In the comments down below, give me a hint. How would you guys do it? Tips would be greatly appreciated, that's for sure. But for right now, we're going to put a nice big bead around that pipe in the middle. Probably about 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch deep, maybe 1/4 inch. I don't know, whatever basically comes out of the tube is what we're gonna give it. It's gonna be kind of hard because of the The pipe's gonna want to move, but let's see what happens. Again, using my respirator, so I won't be able to talk anymore. Alright, we're gonna let that sit for another 12 hours or so, and then we'll come back to it and see how she looks, see what happens. Okay, it is now Monday evening, and we're ready to put this guy in the tent. It's fully cured, everything's nice and hard. This lip actually turned out really, really well. It's nice and tight, fits the pipe really good. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna basically coat this kind of flap around here. I'm gonna coat that all in silicone. And then I'm gonna go, I have the tent set up downstairs in the basement. I'm gonna go and stick it on there and put weights all the way around it and just let it cure. And then I'm going to do a little bit of a waterproofing test and see how that goes. See how kind of stuck to the tent it is. If it's really stuck, I'm just gonna leave it and kind of see how she works out. If I find that it's not very stuck at all, I'm going to sew it and then I'll re-silicone the outside and what's it called? Ensure it's all good. But for right now, I want to try and, the reason I don't want to sew it right off the bat is because if the silicone is sticky enough that it sticks to the tent well and good, that then when I don't have to put all those extra holes into the top of the tarp, which is going to help keep it more waterproof. And also then all of this stitching that's on the outside here would actually be outside of the silicone bead, so that's not going to affect any waterproofing anyways. The only issue that we'll have with waterproofing then is just this big hole in the middle, which we shouldn't have any issues with because this seals really nice against the pipe. So that's the plan for now. I'm going to silicone all that and then take it inside and put it on the tent. I was going to do it in the shop, but it's cold. And this stuff does say it's okay to apply in the cold, but I think just for best results, usually applying like glue and adhesives when it's warm, usually that works the best. So that's why I'm going to try and do it inside where it's warm. That's the plan anyways. And there's just not enough room in the garage to do it. So we're going to do it downstairs in the basement. Okay, so down in the basement, I've got the stove jack here. I've got the tent sort of spread out. You can't really have the tent popped up because then I can't put any weight on it to put pressure down. So I'm gonna flip the stove jack over, put it on there, about 4 inches from the edge, which will put the hole about 15 inches from the wall, which will put the stove about 15 inches from the wall, which should be enough to allow heat to go behind it and hopefully not melt the tent. If it's too close, we can always put a reflector or something in the way to try and stop that from melting the tent. But I'm going to turn you guys around and point you on here, and then you'll kind of see what's going on as I do it here. Okay. Now, big thing is try and keep it from touching the tent until I get it in basically the right location, which is right there. I kind of laid it out beforehand to ensure where it was going to sit. Now I'm just going to take weights and put them on there, and hopefully that kind of does the trick. I'm just going to kind of push it down on there as best we can a little bit there. Now I'm just gonna take these weights that I have and just put them on there to try and kind of squish out as much air and make sure it's pushing on the canvas basically everywhere while it's curing. That's kind of the plan anyways. There's only so many spots that we can get it to touch, but that's pretty good there actually. Some of the poles underneath here unfortunately stick up, so I can't quite get it all the way down, but that seems to get a lot of coverage there. Yeah, so that's it for now. We'll let it sit for 24 hours and then come back and see whether she sticks or not. If not, then we'll do some sewing. It's 24 hours now after we put this stove jack on here. I have moved around the weight a couple times just to make sure that there's pressure occurring on all that silicone all the way around the tent. So now I'm gonna take that off and just grab onto the hole in the stove jack and give it a yank and see what happens. If it's on there, good. It'll stay on there. If it's not on there very good, it'll come right off. So let's see what happens. Wish me luck. Oh, hey, well, I would say that's a success. It definitely stuck on there, and it's actually really stuck. Wow. That's pretty good. There is, along the top here though, oh, no, we got a failure. Along the top, it's not, there wasn't enough pressure down there to get it to sink into the tent. There she goes, yep. There she comes off. Okay. Well, that's a failure. So it doesn't, the silicone doesn't really grab into that mesh cloth very much. So I guess we're gonna have to do the one thing I really didn't want to do, and that is sew through this tent a whole bunch. Just cleaning up some of the silicone that's on there. Yeah, I guess I thought the silicone would stick into this canvas enough, and it wouldn't have any issues with that, but apparently we do. So you can see it definitely spread out enough all along the edges, and it definitely adhered to the silicone on the mat. But as for adhering to the whole thing, I didn't do a very good job of that. So now for the really fun part. I'm gonna have to sew this somehow. Okay. Ugh. That's gonna be hard. Alright, I'm gonna figure out how to sew this and then I'll get back to you guys in a little bit. Alright guys, so I think I've got it figured out. I'm going to there's a window down here that I'll be able to put my arm through, and I'll be able to sew along the edge, and then we can sew the whole thing up, and life's good. Shouldn't be an issue. The reason, what I was gonna do is I was gonna cut the hole out of the middle here, and then sew it up after, like once I cut the hole. But the problem is the fabric's kind of got to be stretched so that once you cut that hole, this fabric's not going to be kind of in the same position. It's going to pull away, so it's going to make the hole a weird shape, and I think it's going to cause issues later on. So I'm going to sew it while the fabric is still tight, and then I'll cut it out after. So that's the plan. I'm going to sew it up, and then I'll update you, and we'll close out this video after it's done. I'm just about ready to sew this on. I did go and put a thin coat of silicone again back on it because it did kind of adhere to the tent, and it's going to help waterproofing. Obviously I'm going to have to waterproof it somehow in the future. I'm going to have to put waterproofing on top or something because I'm going to have to put a whole bunch of holes in the tent. Not really happy about having to do that, but that's what we got to do to get the job done. So I'm going to go and sew this all around, and hopefully it doesn't take forever. That's it. Last stitch. Yay. Great. Now there's only a couple of things left to do here. Yay. Alright, so that took me just over 2.5 hours. It's fully stitched all the way around. There's a bead of silicone underneath it. So now what I'm going to do, as you can see now it's actually attached to the tarp without ripping off. I'm going to put it back down, and I'm going to put weights back on there again until that silicone cures tomorrow night, and then we'll cut out the inside stove jack. And that will be it. This is where I'm going to end this part of the DIY build, and I think that's it basically. We're going to have another part of our ice fishing winter tent coming up, where we actually set up the tent and put a stove in it and burn it and see kind of how hot the tent gets. Hopefully it gets warm enough. And that will be the next episode coming out next week. We're going to do that over the weekend. So thanks for watching, guys. Comment, like, subscribe if you enjoyed it. Turn on those notifications so you know when our videos come out. Our videos usually come out every Thursday at 5 p.m. so that's pretty common. So if you can't be there, just put on your notifications. They'll send you a little email so you'll know when our video comes out. And as always, guys, hook sets are free. Have a great night.